to discuss with you today the life of Ted Bundy. And after you hear my presentation, you can decide if he or Jim Jones is creepier. They're both pretty creepy, so. These are my objectives. You guys can read them. They're on your handout. So who is Ted Bundy? This is Ted Bundy. Since some of you guys didn't know who he was, thought he might be a television character, he was a serial killer in the 1970s, and he was convicted of killing women in at least 6 states across the United States. He traveled a lot killing women, and considering there was no database at the time, it was the 70s, his murders couldn't be connected to each other or to him, so he got away with it for a long time. When he was being executed in 1989, he confessed to killing 28 women, but there are theories that he has killed over 100 women in his killing spree, and starting as early as age 14. So the question for you guys is, what do you think are some characteristics of serial killers as children?
Like usually ones like killing animals.
Killing animals, okay. What else?
Like unhappy home.
Okay, that's good. Family issues.
Abuse.
Yeah. Anything else? So I asked this question in my needs assessment, and some of you guys said very apathetic, void of emotions, anger, violence, creepy. So there's a website that compiled the characteristics of 36 convicted serial killers, and they took all of the characteristics and figured out which ones were the most common, and these are the top ones in order. And daydreamer was number 1, erotic fantasies number 2, and up to 85% of the serial killers that they interviewed displayed these characteristics. So they're pretty common. So in comparing them to Ted Bundy, I'll discuss with you which ones he displayed. He definitely had erotic fantasies. When he was younger, he would go around to trash cans looking for pictures of naked women. And when he was 3 years old, his aunt was sleeping, and she woke up to him with all the kitchen knives around her bed and him standing over her, smiling creepily at her at age 3. He was very shy. He was a loner. He never wanted to go hang out with his stepfather or his stepbrothers. He didn't have any friends in elementary school. He always wanted to be alone. He always doubted himself. Even though he was really smart, he always had good grades, but he never thought that he was good enough for anyone. And he had a very unstable family life, which is probably something that you guys think of as a common characteristic of most serial killers. So we can go on to talk about his family life. So this is Ted as a child. You can't really see it, but he looks happy, but he was very disturbed as a child. He was born in 1946. His mother's name was Eleanor Louise Caldwell, and she went by Louise. He was born to an unwed mother, and they lived in the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers for the first 8 weeks of Ted's life. And then when they moved out of there, they moved in with Louise's parents, but Louise's mom was so ashamed that her daughter had a baby out of wedlock that she pretended that Ted was her own son. So for the first 23 years of Ted's life, he thought his grandmother was his mom, and his actual mom was his sister. And he was raised this way, and it caused him a lot of problems. And then when he was 4, he moved out of his mom took him, his actual mom, took him to Tacoma, Washington, where they moved together to get away from the abuse of his family. He never knew who his father was. Louise said that it might have been a sailor that she met, but there was also rumors that her own father impregnated her to make Ted. So that was a big issue. So they ended up moving from Philadelphia to Washington to get away from the family, to get away from everything. And when they were there, Louise met a really nice guy named Johnny Bundy. She married him. He was a great guy. He was Ted's stepfather, and they had 4 kids together. And Johnny always tried to be a good father to Ted. He really tried to take him under his wing, but Ted never wanted to be a part of it. He was not receptive at all to Johnny's attempts to get him to hang out and get them to bond and everything. So he was always just very shy and alone. So that was pretty much his childhood. We can go to the next slide. This is Ted in high school. He's got a nice unibrow. He was in high school. He actually started blossoming into a pretty successful man. He was more self-confident. He was more well-dressed, and he did really well in school. He had a high GPA, and he ended up getting really involved in politics when he was in high school, and this was important for him. And it got him to get into a good college, which was the University of Puget Sound. And when he was there, he met his first girlfriend. She goes by the pseudonym of Stephanie, but it's not really known what her actual name is. And he was completely obsessed with her. He loved her so much, and he would lie to her all the time to try to seem that he was more impressive than he actually was. And he would tell her things that weren't true because he really wanted her to love him as much as he loved her. So one summer he went to Stanford. He got an internship at Stanford, and he went there just to impress his girlfriend. But when he got there, he was just completely socially inept. He couldn't handle it. He couldn't make any connections, and he just completely failed. And when he ended up going back to college after the summer was over, his girlfriend said, "You don't have any of the characteristics that I see in a husband, and I don't want to marry you," and she broke up with him. You can change to the next slide. So this is her, and this is Ted. And pretty much after she broke up with him, he was completely obsessed with the fact that he got rejected by her, and he still loved her, and he wanted her back. So this is basically really when he started doing a lot of his murders. And a lot of the girls that he started killing after this really looked a lot like Stephanie. She had dark hair with the part down the middle, and you'll notice in a couple minutes that most of the women that he was convicted of killing and admitted to killing looked a lot like her. So in the first murders that were linked to Ted started in 1974. He would kidnap women, beat them, murder them. There was 13 murders. Oh yeah, you can go to the next one. So these are some of the women that he got convicted of killing. They all deal pretty similar. And he killed 13 women before he got arrested for the first time. So for the first arrest, he kidnapped a woman named Carol, and she ended up escaping from out of his grasp, and went right to the police and explained the situation as to what happened. And a couple months later, when Ted was driving his car, he ran through a traffic check and ended up getting pulled over, and the cop recognized Ted and the car from the description that Carol gave, and his front seat of his car was missing, and he had crowbars, like masks up there, handcuffs, so they took him in for questioning. You can go to the next slide. It became a long process for Ted, and he ended up getting convicted of murdering her and of kidnapping her, and got sentenced to 15 years in prison. So while he was in prison, he decided to represent himself because he knew there was a lot of publicity going around his case. They had the idea that he killed all of these women. There was just no evidence linking it to him. So he wanted to represent himself in prison, in court. And so he was studying in the library, and he actually escaped out the window of the jail. And they caught him shortly after because he tried to steal a car to get away, which was really dumb, and put him back in jail, and he was on lockdown. But he managed to escape jail again for a second time shortly thereafter by crawling up a heating vent, and he went down into a janitor's closet when no one was around, and he escaped, and he just walked right out the front door of the prison. And so after he did that, he was able to successfully go down to Florida. And when he was down in Florida, he kind of blended in with the college life down there, and he did a pretty good job. He survived down there for a couple months on his own. But while he was down there, he ended up getting really lonely, and he yearned for a companion. So he went to this sorority house in Florida, and he hung out with these girls at a party. And then after the party, he ended up murdering all of the girls in the sorority house. And at this point, you could tell that he was really developing as a killer, which means he was making a lot of mistakes. He was sloppy. He wasn't doing his covering up the way that he had been. And so there was a lot of links to him at this point. So after he left, he was just totally crazy, mentally unstable, and he ended up kidnapping Kimberly Leach. she's 12 years old, and she's nothing like his other victims. Obviously, she's 12. All of his other ones were around the age of 20. And he kidnapped her from school grounds, and he ended up murdering her. And because of that, he got convicted of, they easily caught him because he made so many mistakes, and he got convicted of her murder. And her murder was the one that got him sentenced to death penalty. And so he got put to death in Florida in January of 1989. And you can go to the next one. This is Ted's mugshot.